The moment Priscilla Hartford's wagon wheel cracked against the rutted road outside San Francisco, California, she knew her pride would be tested in ways she had never imagined, but she lifted her chin and decided right then that she would fix it herself, even if it killed her. It was March of 1873, and the spring rains had turned the roads into treacherous mud-slicked paths that challenged even the most experienced travelers. Priscilla had been making this journey from her small ranch on the outskirts of town into San Francisco proper every week for the past month, selling what little produce and eggs she could coax from her failing land, and each trip grew harder than the last. She climbed down from the wagon seat, her worn boots sinking into the mud as she assessed the damage. The rear wheel had a crack running through two of its spokes, and the iron rim had loosened considerably. Her father would have fixed this in minutes, but her father was 6 months dead, buried on the hill overlooking the ranch he had built with his own 2 hands. Her mother had followed him just 3 weeks later, her heart simply giving out from grief, and Priscilla had been left alone at 22 years old, with a struggling ranch, mounting debts, and a stubborn determination not to lose everything her parents had worked for. The sun beat down on her back as she knelt in the mud, trying to assess whether she could make it back home, or if she should attempt repairs here on the road. She had tools in the back of the wagon, rusty and old but serviceable if she could figure out how to use them properly. Her hands were already blistered from the morning's work loading the wagon, and her shoulders ached from the constant physical labor that had become her daily existence. "That wheel's not going to hold much longer," a deep voice said from behind her. Priscilla stiffened, her jaw setting in a hard line. She did not turn around, did not acknowledge the speaker. Instead, she grabbed the nearest tool from her wagon bed, a heavy wrench that she had no idea how to properly use for wheel repair, and pretended to examine the wheel more closely. "I can manage," she said curtly, her voice carrying more confidence than she felt. She heard the sound of a horse moving closer, then the creak of leather as someone dismounted. Boots hit the ground with a solid thud, and she could feel his presence behind her, tall and solid and utterly unwanted. "Wheel repair's tricky business," the man continued, his voice patient and measured, "especially when the spokes are cracked like that. You'll need to remove the rim, replace those spokes, then get the rim heated and fitted back on proper." "I said I can manage," Priscilla repeated, her knuckles white around the wrench handle. There was a pause, long enough that she thought perhaps he had given up, and would leave her to her struggles. But then she heard him moving, walking around to the other side of her wagon, and she finally looked up to see him properly. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of a man who spent his days doing hard physical labor. His hat was pulled low over his eyes, but she could see a strong jaw covered in dark stubble, and lips that looked like they smiled easily, though they were not smiling now. His clothes were dusty from the road, worn but well-maintained, and he wore a gun belt low on his hips in the way that suggested he knew how to use it. "Name's Vincent Mercer," he said, touching the brim of his hat politely. "I work the Mason Ranch about 5 miles north of here. Seen you making this trip most weeks, always alone, always looking like you're carrying the weight of the world." Priscilla stood up, drawing herself to her full height, which still left her a good 8 inches shorter than him. "I did not ask for your assessment of my situation, Mr. Mercer." "No, you did not," he agreed readily. "But I'm offering help anyway. I've got tools in my saddlebag, good ones, and I've repaired more wagon wheels than I can count. I can have this fixed in less than an hour, get you safely home before dark." "I do not need your help," Priscilla said firmly, turning back to her wheel and the wrench she still held uselessly in her hand. Vincent Mercer was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I'll just wait here then. Make sure you get sorted. Wouldn't be right to leave a lady stranded on the road alone." Priscilla's back went rigid. "I am not asking you to wait." "No," he agreed again, maddeningly calm. "But I'm staying anyway." She wanted to scream at him, to order him away, to tell him that she did not need his pity or his charity or whatever misguided sense of chivalry was driving him to interfere in her business. But she also knew that making a scene on the side of the road would accomplish nothing except to waste precious daylight hours. So instead, she ignored him completely and turned back to her wheel, determined to figure out the repair through sheer force of will. An hour later, she was sweating, frustrated, and no closer to fixing the wheel than when she had started. The wrench had slipped twice, skinning her knuckles. She had managed to loosen the rim further, which had only made the problem worse. And Vincent Mercer had sat down in the shade of his horse, his back against a fence post, watching her struggle with an expression of infinite patience. "The rim needs to be heated," he said quietly, not for the first time. "There's a smithy in town, or if you've got a fire pit at your place, we could take it there. But trying to refit it cold will just crack the wheel further." Priscilla threw down her wrench, the metal clanging against the wagon bed. Her hair had come loose from its pins, falling in sweaty strands around her face, and her dress was covered in mud and grease. She felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, hot and humiliating, and she blinked them back fiercely. "Fine," she bit out. "What do you suggest?" Vincent stood up, brushing dust from his pants. "I suggest you let me remove this wheel and load it onto my horse. I'll take it into town to the smithy, get it repaired proper, and bring it back to your place tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, you can ride in my wagon back to Mason's ranch. My boss's wife can put you up for the night, and I'll make sure you and your fixed wagon get home safe tomorrow." "Absolutely not," Priscilla said immediately. "I am not leaving my wagon and goods on the side of the road overnight, and I am certainly not imposing on strangers." "Then what's your plan?" Vincent asked, and there was no challenge in his voice, just genuine curiosity. Priscilla looked at her broken wagon, at the sun sinking lower in the sky, at the long, muddy road that stretched back toward her lonely ranch. She looked at her raw hands and her useless tools and felt the full weight of her isolation pressing down on her shoulders. "I will stay here with my wagon tonight," she said, lifting her chin. "In the morning, I will drive it carefully back home, broken wheel and all. Then I will figure out how to either repair it or get it to town myself." Vincent's jaw tightened. "That's a bad idea on about 6 different levels. It's not safe for you to sleep out here alone, and driving on that wheel could collapse the whole wagon, maybe hurt you in the process." "That is my concern, not yours." "Maybe so," Vincent said slowly, "but I'm making it mine anyway." Before Priscilla could protest, he had walked to his horse and pulled out a well-worn leather tool bag. He knelt beside her wagon wheel and began working with quick, efficient movements that spoke of years of experience. His hands were steady and sure, and Priscilla found herself watching, despite her determination not to accept his help. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Temporary fix," Vincent said, not looking up from his work. "Won't hold forever, but it'll get you home safe tonight. Then tomorrow, I'll come by your place with proper supplies and fix it right. No arguments," he added before she could speak. "You can hate me for helping if you want, but I'm doing it anyway." Priscilla's throat felt tight. She wanted to argue, wanted to send him away, wanted to maintain the walls she had built around herself since her parents' deaths. But she was so tired, tired of fighting every single battle alone, tired of pretending she knew what she was doing when everything felt like it was falling apart. "Why?" she asked quietly, and the word came out smaller than she intended. Vincent looked up at her then, and she saw his eyes properly for the first time. They were a deep brown, warm and kind, with crow's feet at the corners that suggested he smiled often. "Because you need help," he said simply, "and because nobody should have to struggle alone when there are people willing to lend a hand. You do not even know me." "No," he agreed, turning back to his work. "But I'd like to." The words hung in the air between them, and Priscilla did not know how to respond. So she said nothing, just watched as Vincent Mercer worked steadily on her wagon wheel, his capable hands performing what seemed like magic with wood and metal. He used leather strapping to reinforce the cracked spokes, tightened the rim as much as was possible without heat, and tested the wheel's stability multiple times before he was satisfied. "There," he said finally, standing and wiping his hands on his pants. "That should get you home. But you need to drive slow and careful, and you absolutely need a proper repair before you try taking this wagon to town again." "How much do I owe you?" Priscilla asked stiffly. Vincent shook his head. "Nothing. It was a temporary fix, barely worth mentioning. I do not accept charity." "It is not charity," Vincent said patiently. "It is being neighborly. Out here we help each other. That is how we survive." Priscilla wanted to argue, but she was exhausted and the sun was getting low, and she still had a long drive ahead of her. "Thank you," she said finally, the words feeling rusty and unused. "For the help." Vincent's face broke into a smile, and Priscilla felt something flutter in her chest that she firmly ignored. "You are welcome, Miss Hartford. I will see you tomorrow morning to finish the job proper." "That is not necessary," Priscilla started, but Vincent was already mounting his horse. "Sunrise," he said, tipping his hat to her. "I will bring coffee." Then he was riding away, leaving Priscilla standing beside her temporarily repaired wagon, feeling confused and irritated, and strangely warm all at once. True to his word, Vincent Mercer appeared at her ranch just as the sun was breaking over the eastern hills the next morning. Priscilla had been up for hours, had already fed her chickens and milked her cow, and tried unsuccessfully to fix the fence that had been sagging for weeks. She heard his horse before she saw him, and she quickly wiped the sweat from her forehead and tried to look like she had everything under control. "Morning," Vincent called out cheerfully, dismounting with easy grace. He was carrying a saddlebag that clinked with tools and, as promised, a tin coffee pot that was still steaming. "You are very persistent, Mr. Mercer," Priscilla said, trying to sound disapproving. "Yes, madam, I am," Vincent agreed easily. "Where's that wagon?" Priscilla gestured toward the barn, where she had managed to park the wagon the night before. Vincent nodded and headed that direction, and Priscilla found herself following, unable to simply let him work without supervision. He set up quickly, building a small fire and placing iron rods in it to heat, while he removed the damaged wheel completely. He worked with the same calm efficiency she had observed the day before, and Priscilla tried not to notice the way his shoulders moved under his shirt, or the way he hummed quietly to himself as he worked. "You have been ranching long?" Vincent asked as he worked. "My whole life," Priscilla answered. "This land was my father's. He claimed it back in '49, during the gold rush. He never found gold, but he built a good life here anyway." "And now it is yours?" Priscilla's jaw tightened. "Yes, though the bank seems to think it should be theirs instead." Vincent glanced up at her, his expression sympathetic. "Tough times for small ranchers. Big operations keep squeezing the rest of us out." "You work for a big operation?" Priscilla pointed out. "I do," Vincent acknowledged. "But I have been saving my wages, hoping to get my own place someday. Nothing huge, just enough land to run some cattle and maybe grow some crops. Build a house, have a real home." "It is not as easy as it sounds," Priscilla said quietly. "I imagine it is a lot harder when you are doing it alone," Vincent replied, his voice gentle. Priscilla looked away, blinking against the sudden sting in her eyes. She did not cry, had not allowed herself to cry since her mother's funeral. Tears were weakness, and weakness meant losing everything. "I manage," she said firmly. "I can see that," Vincent said, "but managing and thriving are two different things." Before Priscilla could respond, Vincent pulled the heated iron from the fire and began the delicate work of refitting the wheel rim. She watched, fascinated despite herself, as he shaped and adjusted the metal with practiced skill. The work took most of the morning, and somewhere in the middle of it, Priscilla found herself pouring them both coffee from Vincent's pot and sitting down on an overturned bucket to watch him work. "Where did you learn to do all this?" she asked. "My father was a wheelwright back in Missouri," Vincent said. "Learned the trade young. Then I headed west when I was 17, worked ranches all through Colorado and Nevada before settling here in California 2 years back. Figured I had wandered enough, was time to put down roots." "Why San Francisco?" Vincent shrugged. "Good land, good opportunities, and far enough from the snow that I do not have to freeze half the year. Missouri winters are brutal." "California has its own challenges," Priscilla said. "Drought mostly. My creek is running lower every year." "Mason's ranch has the same problem," Vincent said. "We have been talking about digging deeper wells, maybe building a windmill to pump water more efficiently." Priscilla sighed. "All things that cost money, I do not have." Vincent was quiet for a moment, concentrating on his work. Then he said carefully, "You know, if you ever needed help with repairs or heavy work around here, I would be happy to lend a hand. No charge, just neighborly assistance." "I cannot accept that," Priscilla said immediately. "Why not?" "Because I do not accept charity." Vincent looked up at her, his brown eyes serious. "Is it charity if I enjoy doing it? I like fixing things, always have. And to be honest, working the same ranch day after day gets monotonous. I would welcome the variety." Priscilla shook her head. "You do not understand. If I start accepting help, if I admit that I cannot do this alone, then I am admitting that everyone was right. The banker who told me to sell and move to town. The neighbors who whispered that a woman could not possibly run a ranch by herself. My own uncle, who wanted me to come live with his family in Sacramento, and give up everything my parents built. If I accept help, I am proving them all right." Vincent set down his tools and stood, crossing the space between them in 2 long strides. He did not touch her, but he stood close enough that Priscilla had to tilt her head back to look at him. "Asking for help does not make you weak," he said quietly. "It makes you smart. Every successful rancher I have ever known had a network of people they could rely on. Nobody builds anything worthwhile completely alone." "I have to," Priscilla whispered. "I have to prove I can do this." "To who?" Vincent asked gently. "Your parents would want you to be happy and healthy, not work to death trying to prove a point. And anyone who judges you for accepting help is not worth your concern." Priscilla looked away, her throat tight with emotion she refused to release. Vincent studied her for another long moment, then returned to his work without another word. By noon, the wheel was completely repaired, stronger than it had been even when new. Vincent had also, she noticed, fixed a wobbly step on her porch and tightened the hinges on her barn door while she was inside, checking on her livestock. "You did not need to do all that," Priscilla said as he packed up his tools. "I was here anyway," Vincent said with a shrug. "Besides, that step was an accident waiting to happen. Could not in good conscience leave it like that." Priscilla wanted to argue, but she was finding it increasingly difficult to maintain her walls against Vincent's steady kindness. "Would you like some lunch before you go?" she heard herself asking, and then immediately wanted to take it back. But Vincent's face lit up with a smile that transformed his entire appearance. "I would like that very much, Miss Hartford." "Priscilla," she said before she could stop herself. "You can call me Priscilla." "Only if you call me Vincent," he replied. They ate a simple meal of bread, cheese, and cold chicken at her kitchen table, and Priscilla found herself talking more than she had in months. Vincent was an easy listener, asking questions that showed genuine interest in her life and her struggles with the ranch. He did not offer unwanted advice or tell her what she should be doing differently. He just listened, and something about that made Priscilla feel seen in a way she had not felt since her parents died. "I should get back to Mason's ranch," Vincent said reluctantly as the sun moved past its zenith. "But I meant what I said. If you need help with anything at all, you can find me there. Or leave word at the general store in town. I check there most days." "I will keep that in mind," Priscilla said, knowing she would do no such thing. Vincent seemed to know it too, because his smile turned slightly sad. "You are going to keep struggling alone, are you not?" "I have to," Priscilla said simply. Vincent nodded slowly. "Well, I suppose I will just have to keep happening by, making sure you are all right. Purely by coincidence, of course." "Vincent," Priscilla started, but he was already heading for his horse. "See you around, Priscilla," he called over his shoulder, and then he was riding away, leaving her standing in her doorway, feeling more confused than ever. Over the following weeks, Vincent Mercer became a strangely consistent presence in Priscilla's life. He never announced his visits, just appeared when she was in the middle of some task that was proving too difficult to manage alone. When her plow horse threw a shoe, Vincent showed up with farrier tools and had the horse reshod within an hour. When a section of her fence collapsed during a spring storm, Vincent arrived the next morning with new posts and wire. When her roof started leaking, Vincent spent an entire Saturday afternoon patching holes and replacing shingles. Each time, Priscilla protested. Each time, Vincent ignored her protests and did the work anyway. And each time, Priscilla found it a little harder to maintain her determination to refuse his help. "You cannot keep doing this," she told him one afternoon, as he repaired her chicken coop, which had been damaged by a coyote attempting to get at her hens. "Doing what?" Vincent asked innocently, hammering a board into place. "Showing up here, fixing things, acting like you have nothing better to do with your time." "Maybe I do not," Vincent said with a shrug. "Maybe I like spending time here." "Why?" Priscilla demanded, genuinely baffled. "I have been nothing but ungrateful and rude to you since we met. Why do you keep helping me?" Vincent set down his hammer and turned to face her fully. His expression was serious, his brown eyes intent on hers. "Because I see you, Priscilla. I see how hard you are working, how much you are sacrificing, how determined you are to keep your parents' legacy alive. I see your strength and your stubbornness and your pride, and I admire all of it. But I also see how much you are hurting, how alone you are, and I cannot stand by and watch you struggle when I could help ease the burden, even just a little." Priscilla felt her breath catch in her throat. You do not owe me anything." "No," Vincent agreed. "But maybe I want to be here anyway. Maybe I have started to care about what happens to you. Maybe I look forward to these visits more than just about anything else in my week." "Vincent," Priscilla whispered, but she did not know what else to say. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the scent of wood shavings and honest sweat on him. "I am not asking for anything from you, Priscilla. I am not trying to take over your ranch or prove that you cannot handle things on your own. I just want to help, and maybe, if you would let me, I would like to be your friend." Priscilla felt something crack inside her chest, some hard protective shell that she had built around her heart beginning to fracture. "I do not know how to do this," she admitted quietly. "I do not know how to let people in anymore. It hurts too much when you lose them." "I know," Vincent said softly. "But closing yourself off hurts too, just in a different way. Lonelier." Priscilla looked up at him, at his kind eyes and patient expression, and felt tears finally escape down her cheeks. Vincent reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently brushed the tears away with his thumbs. "It is all right to need help," he murmured. "It is all right to let someone care about you." Priscilla closed her eyes, leaning into his touch for just a moment before stepping back. "I am not good at this," she warned him. "That is all right," Vincent said, his voice warm with something that might have been affection. "I am patient." From that day forward, something shifted between them. Priscilla still did not ask for help, but she stopped protesting quite so vehemently when Vincent showed up. She started setting an extra place at her table on the days she suspected he might appear. She began to look forward to his visits, to the sound of his horse coming up her drive, to his easy smile and terrible jokes, and the way he made even the hardest work seem manageable. Vincent, for his part, became even more attentive. He taught her how to properly maintain her tools so they would last longer. He showed her more efficient ways to complete her daily chores. He brought her seeds from Mason's ranch, vegetables that grew well in California's climate, and he talked to her, really talked to her, about everything from politics to philosophy to his dreams for the future. "I want a place of my own," he told her one evening as they sat on her porch watching the sunset. "Not a huge ranch, just enough to make a living. Maybe run some cattle, grow some crops. Have a house with a real foundation, not just a cabin, somewhere to build a life." "That sounds nice," Priscilla said softly. "Could be room for a family too," Vincent added, glancing at her sideways. "If I found the right woman who wanted that kind of life." Priscilla's heart beat faster, but she kept her voice level. "That is a big if." "Maybe," Vincent agreed, "but I am an optimistic man." As spring turned to summer, Priscilla's ranch began to show signs of real improvement. With Vincent's help, she had repaired all her fences, fixed her irrigation system, and even expanded her chicken coop to accommodate more birds. Her vegetables were growing well, and she had managed to sell enough produce in town to make a payment on her bank debt. But more than the physical improvements, Priscilla herself was changing. The hard, brittle edges that grief had carved into her were beginning to soften. She smiled more often, she laughed at Vincent's jokes, and she was starting to admit, at least to herself, that Vincent Mercer had become far more than just a helpful neighbor. She was falling in love with him. The realization hit her one morning as she watched him working in her barn, mucking out stalls while singing an off-key cowboy song. He had arrived early, as he often did on his days off from Mason's ranch, bearing fresh bread from the ranch cook, and a determination to tackle her list of chores. She loved the way he treated her animals with gentle care. She loved his patience and his kindness, and the way he never made her feel less capable just because he was helping her. She loved his laugh and his steady presence and the way he looked at her like she was something precious. And it terrified her. "Vincent," she said abruptly, interrupting his singing, "why do you really keep coming here?" He looked up from his work, leaning on his pitchfork. "I told you why. I care about you." "But why?" Priscilla pressed. "I am not easy to be around. I am stubborn and proud, and I have more problems than solutions. Why would you want to spend your free time here instead of courting some nice girl in town, someone without all my complications?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Then he set down his pitchfork and walked toward her, his boots crunching on the hay-strewn floor. He did not stop until he was standing right in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Because I do not want some nice girl in town," he said quietly. "I want you. I want your stubbornness and your pride And yes, even your complications. I want your strength and your determination and the way you face every challenge like you are ready to fight the whole world. I want to help you save this ranch, not because I think you cannot do it alone, but because I want to be part of your life, part of your future. I want mornings like this, working beside you. I want evenings on your porch watching sunsets. I want all of it, Priscilla, if you will let me. Priscilla felt her chest tighten, emotion threatening to overwhelm her. I am afraid, she whispered. I am afraid to want this, to want you, because what if I lose you too? I do not think I could survive that again. Vincent reached up and cupped her face gently in his calloused hands. You will not lose me. I am not going anywhere. I am here, and I am staying. Whether you let me court you properly, or whether you keep me at arm's length forever, I would rather have your friendship than nothing at all, but I am hoping, really hoping, that you might want more than that. I do, Priscilla breathed. I want more. I want you. But I do not know how to do this, how to let myself be vulnerable again. Then we will figure it out together, Vincent said. And then he was leaning down, and Priscilla was rising up on her toes, and their lips met in a kiss that felt like coming home. It was gentle at first, tentative, both of them almost afraid of the intensity of feeling between them. But then Priscilla's hands came up to grip Vincent's shirt, and his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer, and the kiss deepened into something that spoke of months of longing and hope, and a future that was finally within reach. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. I have wanted to do that for so long, he murmured. Why did you wait? Priscilla asked, still clutching his shirt like he might disappear if she let go. Because you needed to be ready, Vincent said simply. You needed to learn to trust me first, to believe that I was not going to hurt you, or leave you, or try to take control of your life. You needed to know that I see you as my equal, Priscilla, not as someone who needs rescuing. You are the strongest woman I have ever met. And I wanted you to see yourself that way too, before we took this step. Priscilla felt fresh tears sliding down her cheeks, but these were different from the tears of grief and frustration she had shed before. These were tears of relief, of joy, of a burden she had been carrying alone, finally being shared. I love you, she said, the words coming out raw and honest. I think I have loved you since that first day on the road, when you helped me even though I was horrible to you. Vincent's smile was brilliant, lighting up his whole face. I love you too. Have from the moment I saw you trying to fix that wheel with sheer determination and a wrench you did not know how to use. Priscilla laughed, the sound surprised out of her. I was terrible at it. You were magnificent, Vincent corrected, pulling her close again. And you are going to be even more magnificent when you let me stand beside you instead of watching from a distance. No more distance, Priscilla promised, wrapping her arms around his neck. I am done pushing you away. Good, Vincent said, and kissed her again. The summer of 1873 was one that Priscilla would remember for the rest of her life as the summer everything changed. Vincent began openly courting her, which scandalized some of the more traditional folks in San Francisco, but which Priscilla found she did not care about in the slightest. He still helped with her ranch work, but now it was explicitly a partnership, with Priscilla teaching him the specific quirks of her land and Vincent sharing his broader ranching knowledge. They worked side by side through the long, hot days, and in the evenings, they sat on her porch and talked about everything and nothing. Vincent told her about his childhood in Missouri, about the mother he had lost to influenza when he was 12, and the father who had worked himself to death, trying to provide for his remaining children. Priscilla shared memories of her parents, both the happy times and the pain of watching them slip away from her. I was so angry after they died, she confessed one night, her head resting on Vincent's shoulder. Angry at them for leaving me, angry at the world for taking them, angry at myself for not being able to save them. I think that anger is what kept me going, what made me so determined to keep this ranch no matter what. But it was also eating me alive. And now? Vincent asked gently. Priscilla thought about it for a moment. Now I am still sad sometimes, and I miss them terribly. But the anger is fading. You helped with that, showing me that I do not have to fight every battle alone, that accepting help does not mean admitting defeat. You taught me that being vulnerable does not make me weak. Vincent pressed a kiss to the top of her head. You taught me a few things too. Like what? Like patience, Vincent said with a chuckle. And persistence. And that sometimes the things most worth having are the things you have to work hardest for. Winning your trust, earning your love, those were not easy tasks, but they were the most rewarding things I have ever done. As autumn approached, Vincent and Priscilla began making plans for their future. Vincent had saved a considerable amount of money from his years of ranch work, and he proposed using it to expand Priscilla's ranch and make it truly profitable. It would be our ranch, he clarified when Priscilla looked uncertain. Not me taking over yours, but us building something together. I would leave Mason's ranch, work here full-time. We could pool our resources, get that windmill you need, maybe buy some cattle to run alongside your crops. Make this place what your father always dreamed it could be. You would do that? Priscilla asked. Give up your steady job, invest all your savings in a ranch that has been barely scraping by? In a heartbeat, Vincent said firmly. This place has good bones, Priscilla. Good land, good water rights, even if the creek is low. Good location close enough to San Francisco to sell produce easily. It just needs more hands working it and some capital investment. Together, we could make this ranch thrive. Together, Priscilla repeated, testing the word. It had been so long since she had been part of a together that the concept felt foreign, but also wonderful. Together, Vincent confirmed. If you will have me, that is. I know I am supposed to do this all proper and romantic, but I cannot wait any longer. Priscilla Hartford, will you marry me? Will you let me be your partner in every sense of the word, building a life and a future here on this land? Priscilla's heart felt like it might burst from her chest. Yes, she said, the word coming out choked with emotion. Yes, Vincent, I will marry you. I will be your partner and your wife, and we will build something beautiful together. Vincent let out a whoop of joy and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. When he finally set her down, he kissed her with such tenderness and passion that Priscilla felt it all the way to her toes. They were married in October of 1873 in a simple ceremony at the small church in San Francisco. Priscilla wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved and altered to fit her slimmer frame. Vincent wore a new suit that he had bought specially for the occasion, and Priscilla thought he had never looked more handsome. The ceremony itself was attended by a small gathering of neighbors and friends, including the entire crew from Mason's ranch, who had adopted Vincent as one of their own over his 2 years working there. The ranch owner, Thomas Mason, shook Vincent's hand and told him he was losing one of his best workers, but that he could not be happier about the reason why. You take good care of her, Mason said, nodding toward Priscilla. That girl has been through more than most folks endure in a lifetime. She deserves happiness. I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure she has it, Vincent replied seriously. The wedding celebration was held at Priscilla's ranch, which was now officially the Hartford Mercer Ranch as of that morning's ceremony. Neighbors brought food and drink, and someone produced a fiddle, and there was dancing in the yard as the sun set over the California hills. Priscilla danced with her new husband under the stars, feeling happier than she had thought possible 6 months ago, when she had been alone and struggling and convinced she had to face the world without help. Thank you, she whispered to Vincent as they swayed together. For what? He asked, smiling down at her. For not giving up on me, for seeing past my pride and stubbornness to the person underneath, for loving me even when I was making it very difficult to do so. Vincent pulled her closer. Loving you has never been difficult, Priscilla. It is the easiest thing I have ever done. Their wedding night was spent in the ranch house that was now truly theirs together, and Priscilla discovered that being vulnerable with someone you loved was not frightening at all. It was liberating. It was beautiful. It was everything she had been afraid to want but had needed more than she realized. The months that followed were busy ones. Vincent left his position at Mason's ranch and began working the Hartford Mercer Ranch full-time. True to his word, he invested his savings in improvements, starting with the windmill that would solve their water problems. He also purchased a small herd of cattle, sturdy animals that could thrive on the California grasslands, and began building proper grazing pastures. Priscilla continued her produce operation, but expanded it significantly, using Vincent's knowledge to plant crops that would command better prices in San Francisco's markets. Together, they worked from sunrise to sunset, but the work felt different now. It was not the desperate, lonely struggle it had been before. It was purposeful and satisfying. two people building something meaningful together. By spring of 1874, the ranch was starting to turn a real profit. They made a substantial payment on Priscilla's bank debt, enough that the banker who had once pressured her to sell suddenly became much more pleasant in his dealings with them. They hired two ranch hands to help with the increased workload, young men who were grateful for steady employment and who quickly became part of their extended ranch family. But the best news came in June, when Priscilla realized she had missed her monthly courses for the second time. She went to see the doctor in San Francisco, hardly daring to hope, and came home with confirmation of what she had suspected. She was pregnant. Vincent's reaction when she told him that evening was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy, then immediately set her down carefully, as if she were made of glass. "Are you all right? Should you be standing? Do you need to sit down? Should we call the doctor?" He rattled off, his hands hovering over her anxiously. Priscilla laughed, taking his hands and placing them on her still flat stomach. "I am fine. We are fine. But in about 7 months, we are going to be parents." Vincent's eyes filled with tears, and he pulled her close, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "We are going to have a baby," he whispered in wonder. "A family." "Yes," Priscilla said, her own eyes wet. "A family." The pregnancy was not easy. Priscilla suffered from terrible morning sickness during the first few months, and Vincent fussed over her constantly, trying to make sure she did not overwork herself. Priscilla, of course, ignored most of his concerns and continued helping with ranch work until Vincent finally put his foot down. "Priscilla, I know you are capable of doing anything you set your mind to," he said firmly. "But you are carrying our child, and that is hard work all on its own. Let me and the ranch hands handle the heavy labor. You can still manage the accounts and handle the produce sales and do all the planning work. But please, please do not try to muck out stalls or mend fences or do anything that could hurt you or the baby." Priscilla wanted to argue, but she could see the genuine fear in Vincent's eyes, the worry that something might go wrong. So she agreed to be more careful, to let others do the heavy lifting while she focused on the business side of the ranch. It turned out she had a real talent for the business aspect. She negotiated better prices for their produce, established regular contracts with several restaurants in San Francisco, and even convinced a local dairy to buy their excess milk. By the time fall arrived, the Hartford Mercer Ranch was thriving in a way it had never done during her father's lifetime. "Your parents would be so proud of you," Vincent told her one evening as they reviewed their account books together. "They would be proud of us," Priscilla corrected. "I could never have done this alone. You were right about that, even though it took me far too long to admit it." "You would have figured it out eventually," Vincent said loyally. "You are too stubborn to fail at anything." "Maybe," Priscilla agreed, "but it would have been a much harder, lonelier road. I am glad I do not have to walk it alone anymore." Their son was born on a cold January morning in 1875, arriving 3 weeks early and causing both parents considerable panic. Vincent had ridden into town at breakneck speed to fetch the doctor, leaving Priscilla in the care of their nearest neighbor, a motherly woman named Sarah who had raised 6 children of her own. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Vincent, pacing outside the bedroom door, thought he might lose his mind from worry. But finally, just as dawn was breaking, he heard the thin, reedy cry of a newborn baby, and Sarah opened the door with a smile. "You have a son," she announced, "and your wife wants to see you." Vincent practically ran into the room, his heart pounding. Priscilla was propped up in bed, looking exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up as he entered, and her smile could have lit the entire room. "Vincent, come meet your son," she said softly. Vincent approached almost reverently, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed and looking down at the tiny red face peeking out from the blankets. The baby had a surprising amount of dark hair and was making small snuffling noises as he slept. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You are perfect. You did amazing, Priscilla." "We made him together," Priscilla said, adjusting the blankets so Vincent could see the baby better. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at their newborn son, Vincent said, "What about Peter? Peter Hartford Mercer. Peter means rock, something solid and strong, and Hartford honors your family." Priscilla's eyes filled with tears. "Peter Hartford Mercer. It is perfect. He is perfect." Vincent carefully took the baby from Priscilla's arms, cradling his son for the first time. Peter stirred but did not wake, and Vincent felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. This was his son, his family, his future. "I promise you," he murmured to the sleeping baby, "that you will grow up knowing you are loved. You will have parents who work together, who respect each other, who show you what a real partnership looks like. You will never doubt that you are wanted and cherished." Priscilla reached out and took Vincent's hand, squeezing it gently. "We are going to be such good parents." "Yes," Vincent agreed, looking from his son to his wife with overwhelming love. "We are." The first year of Peter's life was a blur of sleepless nights, constant feedings, and the particular chaos that came with caring for an infant while also running a working ranch. But Priscilla and Vincent faced it together, sharing responsibilities and supporting each other through the exhausting early months. Vincent proved to be a devoted father, getting up for middle-of-the-night feedings without complaint, and spending his rare free moments holding his son and talking to him about the ranch they would someday run together. Priscilla, despite her initial fears that she might not know how to be a mother, took to it with the same determination she brought to everything else in her life. They brought Peter with them as they worked, creating a makeshift cradle in the barn so he could sleep nearby while they completed their chores. The ranch hands doted on the baby, taking turns entertaining him when his parents were busy. Peter grew quickly, becoming a fat, happy baby who smiled easily and seemed to love being outdoors. By the time Peter was walking, the Hartford Mercer Ranch had become one of the most successful small operations in the area. They had expanded their cattle herd, increased their produce output, and even begun experimenting with fruit trees that Vincent thought might do well in the California climate. "We should think about building a new house," Vincent said one evening as they sat on their porch, watching Peter toddle around the yard chasing chickens. "The cabin is getting cramped, and if we are going to have more children, we will need more space." "More children?" Priscilla asked, raising an eyebrow. "I do not recall us discussing that." Vincent grinned at her. "Are you saying you do not want more?" Priscilla was quiet for a moment, watching her son play. Then she said softly, "Actually, we might want to start planning that new house sooner rather than later. I think Peter is going to be a big brother come spring." Vincent stared at her for a long moment, then let out a whoop that startled Peter and sent the chickens scattering. He swept Priscilla up in his arms, kissing her soundly while she laughed against his mouth. "We are having another baby?" he asked, his face split by a huge grin. "We are," Priscilla confirmed. "Are you happy?" "Happy?" Vincent repeated. "Priscilla, I am the happiest man alive. We are going to need that bigger house, a lot more space. Maybe we should add a second story, and we will definitely need to expand the nursery and—" Priscilla laughed and pulled him down for another kiss, silencing his planning. "We have time," she assured him. "But yes, we should probably start building soon." Their daughter was born in April of 1876, on a day when the California wildflowers were in full bloom and the air smelled of spring and new beginnings. The birth was easier than Peter's had been, and Vincent was able to be in the room this time, holding Priscilla's hand and offering encouragement. "She is here," the doctor announced, and suddenly Vincent was looking at a tiny, perfect baby girl with a shock of dark hair and lungs that announced her arrival to the entire ranch. "She has spirit," Priscilla said with a tired laugh, holding out her arms for her daughter. "Just like her mother," Vincent agreed, carefully placing the baby in Priscilla's arms. They named her Margaret, after Priscilla's mother, with the middle name Rose, because Vincent said she was as beautiful as the roses that grew wild on the hills surrounding their ranch. Young Peter, now a toddler of 16 months, was fascinated by his baby sister and wanted to hold her constantly, though he had to be carefully supervised to ensure he did not accidentally hurt her with his enthusiastic affection. The new house was completed that summer, a beautiful 2-story structure with a wide porch, 4 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and even a separate room that Vincent insisted should be Priscilla's office, where she could manage the ranch's business affairs without distraction. It was everything they had dreamed of, and more, a real home built to last generations. "Can you believe this is our life?" Priscilla asked Vincent one evening as they stood on their new porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Inside, both children were sleeping peacefully, and the ranch hands were settling in for the night in the bunkhouse they had built earlier that year. "Sometimes I have to pinch myself," Vincent admitted. When I think about where we started, that day on the road when you were trying to fix your wagon wheel and were so determined not to accept my help. If someone had told me then that we would end up here, married with 2 beautiful children and a thriving ranch, I would have thought they were crazy. I was horrible to you that day, Priscilla said with a rueful smile. You were magnificent, Vincent corrected, just as he had the first time they had this conversation. You were proud and strong and fighting for everything you had, and I fell in love with you right then and there. Priscilla leaned into his side, and his arm came around her automatically. I am glad you did not give up on me. I am glad you saw past my pride to the scared, lonely woman underneath who desperately needed help, but did not know how to ask for it. You never needed to ask, Vincent said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. I saw you struggling, and I helped anyway, every single day until you finally let me in. Best decision I ever made, Priscilla murmured. Second best, Vincent corrected with a grin. What was the first? Marrying me, obviously. Priscilla laughed and swatted his chest playfully. You are impossible, and you love me anyway. I do, Priscilla agreed, turning in his arms to face him. I love you more than I thought possible. You gave me back my life, Vincent. You taught me that being strong does not mean facing everything alone. That true strength comes from knowing when to accept help and building something together with someone you trust. You gave me a partner, a family, a future I had stopped believing I could have. Vincent cupped her face gently in his hands. You gave me all of that too, Priscilla. You gave me a home, a purpose, something worth fighting for. You made me a better man. You are my everything. They kissed as the sun set behind them, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. The years that followed were good ones. The Hartford Mercer Ranch continued to prosper, becoming known throughout the San Francisco area for quality produce and well-raised cattle. Vincent and Priscilla worked side by side, making decisions together and teaching their growing children about ranching and business and the importance of hard work. Peter grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the animals and spent hours following his father around, learning everything he could about ranch management. Margaret was more spirited, always getting into mischief and asking endless questions about everything she encountered. In 1878, they welcomed another son, whom they named Thomas after Vincent's father. And in 1880, twin girls arrived, keeping everyone on their toes with their matching faces and opposite personalities. The ranch expanded to accommodate their growing family, with additions to the house and more land purchased from a retiring neighbor. They hired more hands, built a proper barn to replace the old one, and even installed one of the new mechanized reapers that was making farming more efficient. Through it all, Vincent and Priscilla remained partners in every sense of the word. They still worked together daily, still sat on their porch in the evenings discussing plans and dreams, still looked at each other with the same love and respect that had grown from that first meeting on a dusty road outside San Francisco. Do you ever regret it? Priscilla asked Vincent one evening when they were alone, the children all finally asleep after a particularly chaotic day. Giving up your plans to start your own ranch, investing everything in this place instead? Vincent looked at her in genuine surprise. Regret it? Priscilla, this is my ranch. It is our ranch. We built this together, made it what it is today. Why would I regret that? Because you had dreams of your own place, your own land. Instead, you got my family's struggling ranch and all the problems that came with it. Vincent pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they stood looking out at the land they had built together. I got so much more than that. I got you. I got our children. I got a home and a family and a partnership that makes every single day worthwhile. My dream was never really about the land, Priscilla. It was about building a life that mattered, with someone I loved, and that is exactly what we have done. Priscilla turned in his arms, tears in her eyes. I love you so much. I love you too, Vincent said, kissing her softly. Every day for the rest of our lives, I will love you. As the 1880s progressed, their children grew and the ranch continued to thrive. Peter, now a young man, began taking on more responsibility in the ranch operations, showing a keen mind for business that reminded Vincent of Priscilla. Margaret discovered a passion for breeding horses and started a successful side business, raising and training quality stock. Thomas proved to have a gift with cattle, able to gentle even the most stubborn animals. The twins, Grace and Hope, were still young but already showing their own distinct personalities and interests. Vincent and Priscilla watched their children grow with pride, knowing they were raising the next generation of Hartford Mercers who would continue building on the foundation they had laid. The ranch that Priscilla's father had started, that Priscilla had struggled to maintain alone, that Vincent had helped save and expand, would live on through their children and grandchildren. "We did it," Priscilla said to Vincent one evening in 1885, as they celebrated their 12th wedding anniversary. "We saved the ranch, built a life, raised a family. We actually did it." "We did," Vincent agreed, pulling her into a dance even though there was no music playing. "And it all started because I saw a proud, stubborn woman struggling with a broken wagon wheel and decided to help her anyway." "Best decision you ever made," Priscilla said with a smile. "Second best," Vincent corrected, just as he always did. "And the first?" "Loving you," Vincent said seriously. "That was the first and best decision of my entire life." Priscilla rose up on her toes and kissed him, pouring a decade of love and gratitude into it. When they broke apart, she said, "I am so glad you saw me that day. I am so glad you did not give up, even when I was being impossible. I am so glad you taught me that being proud does not mean being alone." "And I am glad you finally let me in," Vincent replied. "I am glad you took a chance on us, on this life we could build together. I am glad every single day that you were mine and I am yours." They danced together in the twilight, two people who had found each other when they both needed it most and had built something extraordinary together. The ranch stood solid around them, a testament to hard work and partnership, and the kind of love that weathers every storm. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, their children's laughter echoed from the house, and Vincent and Priscilla knew they had achieved something rare and precious. They had built not just a successful ranch, but a home filled with love and joy and the promise of future generations who would carry on their legacy. The years continued to pass in a blur of hard work, family dinners, celebrations, and challenges. But through it all, Vincent and Priscilla faced everything together. They taught their children the values they had learned, the importance of working hard, the strength that comes from partnership, and the courage to ask for help when you need it. Peter married in 1889, bringing home a sweet-natured woman named Elizabeth, who fit into the family as if she had always been there. They gave Vincent and Priscilla their first grandchild, a boy, in 1890, and the ranch house filled with the sound of a new generation. Margaret found love with a neighboring rancher's son, a match that united two of the area's most successful operations. Thomas showed no interest in settling down yet, preferring to focus on his work with the cattle, and the twins were still young, full of dreams and possibilities. Through it all, the Hartford Mercer Ranch prospered. It weathered droughts and economic downturns, always emerging stronger because of the solid foundation Vincent and Priscilla had built. They had created something that would last, something that would provide for their children and their children's children. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1893, Vincent and Priscilla stood in the same spot where they had shared their first kiss all those years ago, in the barn where Vincent had first declared his love. 20 years, Priscilla marveled. "It feels like both a lifetime and no time at all." "Best 20 years of my life," Vincent said, pulling her close. "Though I have to admit, you look even more beautiful now than you did the day I married you." Priscilla laughed. "I am 42 years old with 5 children and more gray hair than I care to count. You are either blind or a liar." "Neither," Vincent said firmly. "You are beautiful because of everything we have built together, everything we have survived. You are beautiful because you are strong and capable and loving. You are beautiful because you are mine and I am yours, and that will never change." Tears pricked at Priscilla's eyes. After all these years, Vincent could still make her cry with his words. "I love you," she whispered. "I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "And I will love you just as long," Vincent promised, sealing it with a kiss. They held each other in the barn, surrounded by the horses and cattle that were part of their livelihood, on the land they had fought so hard to keep and grow. They had started as two separate people, a proud, struggling woman trying to do everything alone, and a patient cowboy who saw her need and helped anyway, and had become one unit, a partnership stronger than either of them could have been individually. The sun set over the California hills, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and the Hartford Mercer Ranch settled in for another night. Inside the house, children and grandchildren gathered for the anniversary celebration, their voices raised in laughter and love. The barn door stood open, and through it, Vincent and Priscilla could see the life they had built, the family they had created, the legacy that would endure. "No regrets?" Vincent asked softly. "Not a single one," Priscilla replied. "This life, this family, this love, it is everything I never knew I needed. You showed me that accepting help does not make me weak, that partnership makes everything better, and that sometimes the best thing you can do is let someone in. You taught me things too," Vincent said. "You taught me that strength comes in many forms, that determination can move mountains, and that the best things in life are the ones you have to fight for." They walked hand in hand back toward the house, toward the family waiting for them, toward the future that stretched bright and promising before them. The ranch would continue to grow and thrive, passed down through generations who would hear the story of how it all began, with a broken wagon wheel, a stubborn woman, and a cowboy who saw her struggling and helped anyway, day after day, until she finally let him into her heart. As they stepped onto the porch where they had spent countless evenings planning and dreaming, Priscilla turned to Vincent one last time. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" Vincent asked, though he was smiling because he knew. "For seeing me, for helping me, for loving me, for giving me this life." "Thank you for letting me," Vincent replied. "Thank you for taking a chance on us, for believing we could build something beautiful together. Thank you for being my partner, my love, my everything." They kissed again, and in that moment, surrounded by family and the land they had built together, they knew they had achieved something truly special. They had taken struggle and pride and loneliness and transformed it into love and partnership and a legacy that would endure for generations. The Hartford Mercer Ranch stood strong against the California sky, a testament to what two people could build when they worked together. And at its heart were Vincent and Priscilla, two souls who had found each other when they needed it most, and had created a love story for the ages. Inside the house, Margaret called for them to come in for dinner, and they could hear the children arguing playfully, and the baby crying, and all the beautiful chaos of a full, happy home. This was what they had built. This was what they had fought for. This was the life that had begun with a simple act of kindness on a dusty road, and had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. Vincent held the door open for Priscilla, just as he had done every day for 20 years. She smiled at him, the same smile that had first cracked his heart open all those years ago, and stepped inside. He followed, closing the door behind them on another perfect day in the life they had created together. The story of the Hartford Mercer Ranch was not just a story about land or cattle or crops. It was a story about pride and humility, about strength and vulnerability, about learning to accept help and finding that partnership could make you stronger than you ever were alone. It was a story about a woman who thought she had to face the world by herself, and a cowboy who saw her struggling and refused to let her do it, helping her day after day until she finally understood that letting him in was not weakness but wisdom. And it was a story about love, the kind of love that is built day by day, choice by choice, through hard work and dedication, and the decision to face everything together, the kind of love that lasts a lifetime and creates a legacy that will endure long after both people are gone. As the family gathered around the dinner table that night, 3 generations of Hartford Mercers together, Vincent and Priscilla looked at each other across the chaos and noise and knew that every struggle had been worth it. Every hard day, every challenge overcome, every moment of vulnerability and growth had led them to this: a house full of love, a ranch that would endure, and a partnership that had transformed both of their lives. They had started as strangers on a road outside San Francisco, one too proud to ask for help, and the other too kind to walk away. They had become friends, then lovers, then partners in every sense of the word, and now, 20 years into their marriage, they were still choosing each other, still building their life together, still grateful every single day for the moment they found each other. The candles flickered on the anniversary cake Margaret had made, and the family sang together, voices blending in celebration. Vincent reached across the table and took Priscilla's hand, squeezing gently. She squeezed back, and in that simple gesture was everything they had built together: trust, love, partnership, and an unshakable commitment to face whatever came next, side by side. This was their happily ever after, earned through struggle and perseverance and the courage to be vulnerable with each other. This was the life they had built from that first day when Vincent saw Priscilla struggling and helped anyway, beginning a pattern that would define their entire relationship. This was what happened when two people chose to work together instead of alone, when pride gave way to partnership, when love was allowed to grow and flourish and become the foundation of something truly special. The Hartford Mercer Ranch would continue for generations, but at its heart would always be this story. The story of Vincent and Priscilla, two people who found each other when they needed it most and built a love that would last forever. They had taken a failing ranch and made it thrive. They had raised a family that would carry on their values and their legacy. They had created a partnership that proved, day after day, that accepting help was not a sign of weakness, but a path to something stronger and more beautiful than either of them could have achieved alone. As the celebration continued around them, Vincent leaned over and whispered in Priscilla's ear, "Best 20 years of my life. Here is to 20 more." Priscilla smiled, her heart full to bursting. "And 20 more after that, and 20 more after that, for as long as we both live." "Deal," Vincent said, sealing it with a kiss that made their grandchildren giggle and their children roll their eyes fondly. This was their story, and it was a good one, a story of struggle and triumph, of pride and humility, of learning to accept help and finding that partnership made everything better. It was a story that began with a broken wagon wheel and a stubborn woman and a cowboy who refused to walk away. And it was a story that would endure, passed down through generations as an example of what real love looked like: patient, persistent, supportive, and strong. The Hartford Mercer Ranch stood as a monument to what they had built together, but the real legacy was in the family they had raised, the love they had shared, and the lesson they had taught everyone who knew them, that being strong enough to accept help, to be vulnerable, to build something with someone else, was the greatest strength of all. As the evening drew to a close and the family began to disperse to their various rooms and homes, Vincent and Priscilla stood once more on their porch, looking out at the land they loved. "We did good," Priscilla said softly. "We did," Vincent agreed, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "We did real good." And under the California stars, surrounded by everything they had built and everyone they loved, Vincent and Priscilla Mercer knew they had found something rare and precious, a love that had weathered every storm, a partnership that had made them both stronger, and a legacy that would endure for generations to come. Their story had started with pride and struggle, but it had become something beautiful, a testament to the power of love, the strength of partnership, and the courage it takes to let someone help you carry your burdens. It was a story of the Wild West, of ranching and hard work and building something from nothing. But most of all, it was a love story, the kind that inspires and endures and proves that sometimes the greatest adventure is not facing the world alone, but finding the person who will stand beside you through everything. Vincent and Priscilla had found that in each other, and it had made all the difference. As they headed inside for the last time that night, hand in hand, as they had been for 20 years and would be for many more to come, they knew they had achieved something truly special, a love that had transformed both of their lives and created a legacy that would last forever. The Hartford Mercer Ranch slept peacefully under the stars, a testament to two people who had chosen partnership over pride, vulnerability over isolation, and love over loneliness. And at its heart, now and always, were Vincent and Priscilla, proof that sometimes the best thing you can do is let someone see you struggling and help anyway, day after day, until you build something beautiful together.